basically the Firebase Essentials, and Wenga Kuo, a software engineer. And apart from building stuff, I'm also a community lead in some of the communities based here in Kenya. First one being Anita.org Nairobi, which is about advocating for women inclusivity in tech. Apart from that, I'm also a co-organizer of GDG Nairobi, where we are always talking about advocating for use of Google technologies when it comes to building solutions. And also on top of that, I'm a co-lead of Angular Kenya, which is a community we started about a year ago, which is all about kind of like spreading the gospel of Angular for budding developers. And we usually have sessions and speakers coming from different parts of the country or even different parts of the world. We have even GDEs in Angular coming to talk to us about Angular, and even sometimes how Angular can work with databases or NoSQL databases such as Firebase, MongoDB, just to mention a few, and just be on the lookout for sessions that we'll be having very soon. So yeah, let's get right to the business of the day. So first and foremost, and this is something that probably you might have heard out here when it comes to choosing the best database for your applications, right? And that would be organizing and managing data from a backend source can be very hard and complicated. The reason why this is so is because you have to write your own backend code, for example, to handle requests from the client to the server, and then the server works with the databases, whether using PHP whether you're using any other SQL-based service or any other backend service that you are interested in. So today I'm here to talk about Firebase, and Firebase is a platform that was developed by Google for creating mobile and web applications. Firebase is here to kind of like lift off that burden that developers mostly have, and in some way it also makes front-end developers become back-end developers, because with their simple SDKs you can be able to implement crude functionalities of anything. So for example, if you want to develop an application that say it's let's say an event-based application, right? You are posting events and all that. You can be able to perform functionality using Firebase in the most simplest ways using the Firebase SDK. So why use Firebase in the first place, right? So first, one of the most important thing, and I personally feel it's amazing, is that the code is serverless. And that means you don't really have to manage your servers yourself. Everything is built on top of Google infrastructure. Google is the one who's going to handle your servers, going to handle how to scale your servers, for example. And that brings me to the next point, which is like it's built on top of Google scale infrastructure. So for example, if you're going to create a project on Firebase, this is also automatically created on the Google Cloud Platform. Maybe for those who have heard of Google Cloud Platform, is where you it's kind of like a console where you can be able to build like host applications, for example, host machine learning models. Basically, you don't have to have a physical server to store all this kind of information or have to run your machine learning models. You can always host them on Google Cloud, and Google Cloud Platform gives you an array of infrastructure that you can use. You can have the Kubernetes, you can always use Kubernetes. You can have the Google App Engine where you can host websites for free sometimes. You can have you can create virtual machines which you can run them on the cloud. And the beauty of this is Google is the one that's going to handle everything. So when it comes to, let's say, high traffic, and let's say you have a web application and you've hosted it on, let's say, on Google Cloud Services, Google, what's going to do is going to always check, for example, the traffic. If there's too much traffic on a server that they've assigned to you, what they do is they kind of shift it to another server, which is still closer to you, but then also gives you the best output, because that means you have an application that really needs to serve a lot of customers, and that means you need servers that can handle all this traffic. So Google usually handles this for you. And apart from that, there's also features and services that you don't really have to write yourself. So as I mentioned, you don't really have to write code, for example, on how to authenticate a user, or code on how to put information into the database, because Firebase has this SDK which allows you to just tap into the Firebase SDK and just call on their functions or methods, and then you're definitely going to find that you're actually going to resolve or find you find it pretty easy to perform these functionalities using the Firebase SDK, of which I will show you in a few minutes. So one of also the other thing is, of course, building better application, and for this instance is Firestore, which is one of the things we are going to focus on today. And Firestore, basically what it does is it stores and syncs data between users and devices at global scale. And this is all used, this uses cloud hosted NoSQL database. And there's always live synchronization and offline support. That means even when you have applications that are serving people in the rural areas, you can still enable offline support, whereby the users can still read and create data even while offline. And then when they're on the internet, Firebase usually synchronizes it so that it can be hosted on the database online, while at the same time still is cached locally. And then also we have Firebase machine learning, which is basically machine learning features for your mobile applications. So as I mentioned, Firebase is not only for web, but then also for mobile applications. So if you don't want to have a very complex database and you want something very simple, out of the box services, I'll definitely recommend Firebase. And then you also have cloud functions. Personally, this is something I always love working with, cloud functions, which is basically an extension of your app with custom backend code, and without needing to manage and scale your own servers. So think of it as functions, or like functions that are hosted on the cloud. And what they do is they do a specific job. So for example, you want to create a scheduler or a cron job, which checks for the most active user within your application, right? So what your cron job will be doing is, depending on what you set it, whether you want it to always check after every 2 days, after every 3 days, you write the function, your cloud function, and then you host it on Firebase. And then what Firebase is going to do is it's always going to handle the schedulers when it reaches that particular time. So it checks first of all on the timing and what exactly it's supposed to do, and then it does it for you. And also, again, it can also be triggered by events. So for example, you have a button, not a button, but a feature of saying you want to create an admin based on a user's email address. On your front end, you can have, of course, the input where you put in your the email address of the user, and then you also have a button, right? And this button triggers a function, which is like triggers a cloud function that creates an admin, because these are things that you don't want it hosted on your application. You want them hosted on the cloud so that people cannot be able to have access to it. So they can be triggered by events or buttons in this case, then emitted by Firebase products. So this is just one of the things that Cloud Function does. And please, if you get the time, please check it out, and so you can be able to really understand what Cloud Functions are and how they can really help you in some of these, say, tasks that you might have. Another one is Firebase Authentication, which is also one thing we're going to look at in this session. And this is basically management of users in a most simple and secure way, because as I mentioned, Firebase has the methods and functions ready for you just to tap into them. And what they offer is they offer security and the most easiest way of managing these users. And we also have Firebase hosting, which is where you can host your application on Firebase. And of course, sometimes you might want to host a very simple website, which you don't have a lot of backend stuff. You just have like front end, right? Firebase allows you to create a project of which you can host your website on, and you don't really have to think about how fast it's going to be and all that, because again, everything is on top of Google infrastructure, so they're going to handle everything to do with scaling. I think probably you've seen some of the apps that have been hosted on Firebase. They usually have the .firebaseapp.com extension or .web.app, some of them. We also have cloud storage, which is where we store and share generated content like images, audio, which are kind of like powerful and simple, cost-effective object storage built for Google scale. So, for instance, you have an application where people are supposed to upload images or supposed to upload files on your application. Google Cloud Storage allows you to be able to store this information, whether images or audios. So think of it as some sort of like Google Photos or Google Drive in general. And the beauty with this is that even after you, for example, trigger a function that stores your information in the cloud storage, as a way of returning, which we call it returning a promise, it returns with you some information of which you can tap into. For example, the download URL. So when someone wants to say, "Oh, I want to see what this image is," they can always click on that image and then open, for example, in a different tab or in the same tab, and then download it whether they like it or not. And then we also have real-time database, which is when Firebase started. This is where it's where Firebase when Firebase started. This is where they were focusing on. But then, personally, I love using Cloudfast more than real-time database. But essentially, real-time database and Cloudfast are kind of more of the same. And again, it's all about synchronization of data across clients in real time. And then also, apart from that, there's improving of of app quality. Sorry, improvement of app quality. For example, Crashlytics, which is just to help you prioritize and fix issues with powerful real-time crash reporting. So that, for example, if you have a mobile application that uses Firebase and it has crashed, you're able to see the metrics. I think you've probably seen this with most Android developers who are using Firebase. They can let you know, they can tell you how powerful Firebase Crashlytics is for them. And then there's also performance monitoring, which helps you to gain insights into your app's performance. Again, this is more onto the mobile version of it. And then you have the test lab, which is where you can test your app on devices hosted by Google. Again, if you don't really want to to have your application out there to be used by users, for example, you're at a certain stage, it's not completely ready, you can host your application on the devices that are hosted by Google. And then we also have the app distribution. And this is where you can, it's kind of like a platform where it helps you to distribute or provide pre-released versions of your application to trusted testers. So probably you've seen this for people who have been saying like, I'm a beta tester for Uber, I'm a beta tester for this, I'm a beta tester for that. Sometimes these people use Firebase to help them distribute this application to very specific users who can help them test these functionalities. Yeah, and some of these things are always about businesses. There's in-app messaging whereby it provides like very basic information when it comes to your application. If you're a business, there's Google Analytics. This is something you've already seen before. It provides you with metrics on, for example, who uses your application and where they're coming from, what is their age, what is their sex, and what devices are they using. And then there's Firebase predictions, which is kind of like telling you how you can optimize your application to become better. A/B testing, which is, of course, is for testing. Cloud messaging, this can also be coupled up with Cloud Functions, which allows you to send specific or tailored messages to your users, depending on how you want it. So, for example, if a user has been using your application for quite some time, you can always use cloud messaging to send them the information to say, hey Wade, you've been using our applications for quite some time and I'd like to appreciate you. And for this, we're giving you a token of appreciation and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. And then also for the remote configurations and also Firebase dynamic links. So this is more of like business and it's not really related to what we are going to be doing. So I'm just going to brush off on that. As you can see over here, there are two ways of people who have been. The first one is the traditional way of how people have been storing information to the database, right? So of course you have your client application, which is basically laptops, desktops, phones, etc. And then you have an API or an API endpoint, which, for example, passes information to your servers, which again passes information to the database, right? And then there's like a series of steps, and sometimes you might find that the issues say either they're gonna be like people trying to hack your some of the information that you're going to be sending to your servers to corrupt your server, for example, or to corrupt your database, just to mention a few. But then with Firebase, it's just one simple step. From your client, it just goes all the way to Firebase, and then you can tap into the power of Firebase using the Firebase SDK. So as I mentioned, we're going to be touching on just a few things. That's like we're going to be touching on authentication, Cloudfast, Store, and Arbitrum security. So on to the first point, which is on the first topic, which is authentication. And authentication is it usually takes care of logging in your users and identifying them. And this could also be essential, especially when you need to restrict access to per user data. By this, I mean you don't want everyone to see what a person is writing. For example, if it's a notebook, right, and it's a general notebook app. For example, if I have an application, if I have an account that I've created, when I have my information, I don't want someone else to see my information. I only want to see my information, and that means you have to have some sort of like a security or authorization, and that's how Firebase Authentication can come into play. And with this, it makes it easy to perform secure logins, which could be difficult to implement on your own from scratch. Probably for backend developers who have seen this before, they might have seen that it's a bit hectic to create your own functions that's going to handle authentication and all. Firebase does it in the most simplest way possible, and it's very secure. Personally, I love using it for my projects because I know I don't really have to do a lot of coding for authentication. I just need to prepare, initialize my environment for Firebase, and then I just tap into the SDKs, and voila, I'm able to restrict information per user data. And apart from that, it also supports authentication using passwords, phone numbers, popular federated identity providers such as Google, Facebook, and Twitter, and even more. So by this, I mean the traditional way of username and password. That is something we're used to. But also Firebase goes a bit further and also provides you with secure logins for even using phone numbers. So think of it as some sort of like a plus one or a secure layer. For example, sending OTPs. That means making sure that whoever is signing in is actually the person whose information is in the database. And that means if you're using a phone number, right, we have to make sure that we send the message to that particular phone number, put in the code, get the code that is there, and then come and put it back into the application. That's one of the ways of doing it using Firebase Authentication. And also you can also use social medias, services such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, and I think I have it over here. Yes, Facebook, Twitter, Google, GitHub, of which you can use this to even sign in to your application. So if you don't want your users to always type in stuff, they can always use their Google account, or if they're techies, they can always use their GitHub account, so that you don't have to really handle a lot of authentication and all that. Firebase has this off the box. So this is one of the UIs that Firebase, people have been building Firebase. I'm going to share this slide so you'll have the link. And this is like a very simple UI of how using Firebase you can be able to log in using the most simplest way possible. Now, just to get technical, this is a snippet or a piece of code which shows how people can register using their emails and their passwords. So again, this is as you can see over here, right? This is like what, like about say one line of code and then something else below it that handles everything. So Firebase out of the box, you can always refer to Firebase functionality using firebase.auth. That is, if I can just move quickly, yes, over here. So initially, people or developers have to initialize their Firebase environment. And by that, we're going to speak in terms of JavaScript right now. So you can have like a JavaScript file whereby it's just about your Firebase configuration settings. So the first one is, of course, to get the configuration details from your Firebase project, which I'll show you. And then you're going to have your API key, your auth domain, your database URL, ID, search bucket, up to the measurement ID, blah, blah, and all that. After you're done with that, you now have to initialize Firebase. And by that, you do, by initializing your Firebase application is you do Firebase.initialize app and then the configuration settings. And then from there, you now can be able to tap into the power of Firebase. So for example, if you want to make Auth and Firestore references, you can create a variable called Auth, of which you can refer to, you want to use authentication, you want to use Firestore, you want to use Firebase function. Just that's one of the ways of how to do it. But then with this one, we're just going straight to the point and saying that we want to go into Firebase and tap into the authentication function. And inside the authentication function, I want to use the method create user with email and password. And the beauty with Firebase is it's very simple English. It doesn't have to be a lot of technical jargon of like, oh, create user with email and password and tokens, blah, 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 and all that. But just very simple English that someone can even, when they open the documentation, they can see, oh, wow. So this is how you actually register someone with email and password. And then it takes in the parameters, which is the email and the password. And then it returns a promise, which of course you can resolve. You can tap into it if you want. You console.log it if you want. But then also, again, for purposes of clean code, you also want to catch the errors in case there's an error, right? This is how you handle the errors. And then now, if you've registered the person already, you're now able to use the sign in with email and password function method. So again, tap into the function firebase.auth and then use the method sign in with email and password. Again, text in the parameters, email, password. Again, you catch the functions. And the beauty of this is for those who have worked with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript knows how this works. You get your inputs, for example, whether you're using DOM manipulation or whether if you're using frameworks, whichever you're doing it, get the information from the form and then pass it over onto the function and then let Firebase do the rest for you. All you have to do is handle the response and then you are able to sign in your users. And for example, now you've now logged in your user, right? But then you want to control access to the information that's present in this particular application. Now, what we have to do is you have to set something called authentication state observer, and then you're able to get the user data. By this I mean, so you've logged in your user. Firebase allows you to always check, okay, so I've logged in a user. Can I check who this user is? And by that, I can have the display name, I can have the email the email verification, if it's verified or not. I can have the photo URL. By that, I mean, if, for example, they signed in using their Gmail address, we can be able to get their image. And then also you can check if the person is anonymous or not. You can gain access to their user ID and then probably other information like provider data. So provider data is mostly coming from places like either Google, Twitter, or Facebook or GitHub. That's for the provided data. Or else you can have like something that handles if the person has been signed out. And with this particular state is you are able to make sure that whenever you have an instance of always checking this user, you're able to know, okay, if this person is logged in, then I have to show them this particular item. If not, then I throw them out of the application and tell them to log in. Or not, I can just display something else. Because again, you want security in your application, you want your data to be controlled. That means you don't want everyone to just access anything everywhere. Yeah, so again, this is how you get information on a particular user, and then with that, you can control the access to information that's present in a database. And then another simple way of another simple function that I love using with Firebase is just has a very simple logout function, which is again you tap into the function auth.signout and then use the method.signout. And this, of course, you can trigger it using a function, and that is like triggering an event like a button and all that, and that's it. And when you sign the user out, of course, again, this particular function, it's going to check if this particular user has been logged in or not. And if they've been logged out, you can control access and say, if this person has been logged out, then I don't want them to see particular A, B, and C. Again, if it doesn't make sense, I will show you the code so that I can explain it well. Yeah, and then now onto touching about Cloudfast. So for the Cloudfast, it's as I mentioned before when we started, it's a flexible, scalable database for mobile and web, and server development platform for Firebase and Google Cloud Platform. And again, this is, I think for me, it's the most amazing feature that I've always loved using, because Firestore, I know it will never let me down in terms of making sure that it scales whenever I have a lot of traffic in my application. It handles my data well, and the beauty with it is it's the synchronization and the fast response when I get, for example, if I've changed something in a database. As explained here, that it keeps your data in sync across client applications to real-time listeners and offers online support for mobile and web, so you can build responsive apps that work regardless of network latency or network activity. Because again, you'd want to build solutions, right? You're just not building apps, you're building solutions for people. And you have to account for people, say, who have or who are living in the rural areas. You don't want to just say, I'm going to build this application for people living in the urban areas and say it's for selling products, right? But then what is good about you having just one particular user when you can have so many users? You can have people coming from the rural areas, you can have people coming from the different parts of the world. So this is a way of you trying to tap in some of these features and services that Firebase has in store for you, so that you can be able to, again, increase productivity and at the same time bring in revenue for your business. And also apart from that, so how does Cloudfast work? First and foremost, it stores data in documents which contains fields mapping to values. Again, I'll show you a snippet to show you what it means. And for those probably who have seen how key value pairs are, is, for example, I have an object of this object contains the ID, the name, and say the edge, right? So ID, that is the key, and then the value could be 001, and then the name key, the name Wengakuo, and then say edge, let's say 30, right? That's how the fields mapping are done when it comes to storing information in documents inside Cloudfast. And then again, these documents are stored in collections, which are containers for documents that you can use to organize your data and build queries. So for those probably who have used SQL-based databases, you know that you put information in terms of tables, right? You have a table of users, and with this table of users, you have columns for ID, you have column for name, you have column for age, you have column for email address. That's for a typical SQL database. But then for no SQL, and specifically Firebase, you have it in documents. You have it in collections. So the collection is more or less a table as compared to SQL. And then the document is that particular entry that you give. So that entry of Wayne's age, Wayne's email address, Wayne's name, Wayne's height, for example. So I'm just trying to liken it to SQL for those maybe who are not really familiar with how NoSQL works. So I think I've gone through this is how to initialize the Firebase environment. And then now for adding data to your Firestore, Cloudfast, again, it's one of the most simplest ways of doing it. What you just need to do is, first of all, Firestore, it creates a collection and documents implicitly the first time you add data to the document. So this means you don't have to do the way SQL you do. So in SQL, before you even have the information, right, you have to check if the table is there. If the table is not there, then create it. What Firebase does is it's implicit. That means you don't really have to do this check of like, if this does not exist, then create this. Firebase is, whenever you write this particular chunk of code, say DB, which again, I'm trying to I'm trying to referencing what I did here, Firebase.Firestore. So it's more of a short way of at least making code cleaner. I don't want to be writing firebase.firestore and then tapping into the power of Firestore, right? I've created a variable called db, so just bear with me. So db.collection, which says that I want to create a collection named users, and then use the .add method, of which .add method now gets data from your front end or your client side, right? And then your first, last, and born, these are keys that are going to be added onto your document. So you don't really have to say that, oh, first, last, and born are things that are supposed to be, say, defined in your script file or in your front end, right? No. But then first, last, and born, these are keys that Firebase is supposed to understand that, hey, I'm creating a key called first, and then the value that I'm going to give it is now coming from the front end, or I'm going to write it right now over here. And then you have now Ada Loveless, Ada as the first name, Loveless as last, and then the year of born is 1815. And then again, as I mentioned, when you add something onto Firestore, it returns a promise. And when you return a promise, you need to resolve. That means you need to handle the response that comes from it. And now, when you handle, when you get the promises, you now say dot then, of which when I write docref, what I mean is, so now I have the data that's coming back to me. That is what I'm being returned to. I now want to use this this data. So docref can be anything you want. It can be data, it can be Wayne, it can be whatever you want it. And then what I'm saying is I want to console.log the ID. I want to check, so if this information has been added, give me the ID. You are not able to get the ID. And again, you have to catch the error just for cleaner way of communicating to your, even your fellow developers, because again, you wouldn't want to write code that just does stuff and doesn't handle errors when people are running into errors, right? Again, so you don't need to explicitly create collections or documents. And that means you don't need to go to Firebase and say, I want to let me create a collection called users. No. Whenever you trigger this function of creating a user, it will always create the collection for you and then put in the information using a document. Again, we'll show this in the Firebase real time. We document which has, and then on there, I want you to bring me the data. So on snapshot is usually used for getting real-time information. I love using on snapshot or on snapshot sharing just because I want to always be tracking this information in real time. That means I don't want to be waiting until I reload my page so that I can be able to find fresh information. So dot on snapshot allows you to do that. But also you can still learn more about the functions when it comes to reading data on the Firebase official documentation. So again, you go into the DB, going to the collection cities, going to the doc that has the SF value, and no, sorry, not the SF value, but then the doc SF. What I mean is the name of the document. So if you look back over here, this particular data, it's going to be in the collection users, right? But then we're not specifying the name of the document. Again, this is where the power of Firebase come into play. Firebase creates the document's name automatically, and that means it gives it a unique ID, so that you don't need to be always saying that I want you to give it ID1, ID2, ID3, ID4. No, Firebase does that automatically, so you don't have to always say that I want you to create a doc of ID1. If you want, you can do that, but you don't really have to because it does that automatically. And then you have the db.collection. Here is where now I'm saying go into the collection cities, going to the document with the ID SF, and then now give me the data coming from SF. So if that document SF has information about San Francisco, or say the weather, the population, probably the name of the mayor or the name of councillor, whatever, or the governor, the state governor, etc. It's going to bring all the data with it. The .on snapshots is a callback function, of course, of which you now have you now get the information from there. Say, I'm going to have the information coming from there is going to be doc, and then I want to console.log it. So that's why you have console.log doc.data. That means whatever you're returning from me, I just want to tap into the data that comes with it. So that means is say your fields in a document were current weather, time zone, population, blah blah blah. Just as an example. And then again, you wouldn't want sometimes you wouldn't want people to always be writing to your database just like that, right? Because again, this is very sensitive information to be writing to your database, and anyone can write to your database. And again, by the way, also just as a precaution, Firebase is not entirely free. Of course, for the first year, if you register on Google Cloud Platform, you're given $300 worth of credit. But then after your and it goes for a year, and after that has expired, you're going to be billed. So again, you don't want people to be writing to your database because again, it's going to be incurring a lot of billing. So you have to make sure that your data is secure in terms of writing and even reading. So for example, this snippet, of course, I'll show you in the Cloud console, on the Firestore console. It just says that whatever document I'm going to write or whatever collection I'm going to write, they have, or read or write, we have to make sure that whoever reads or writes here has to be authenticated. So again, allow read or write access on all documents to any user signed into their application. So for example, if I have post, right, and it's a blog, you cannot read anything in that blog unless you log in. So that's what the security is all about. So I would like to share my screen once again, just to show you a piece of code where we have all this coming into play. Before I move, does anyone have a question? Any question? Okay, I'll assume there's no question. Okay, so just a minute. All right. So this, because of time, I wouldn't want to write this like all from scratch because it's a bit lengthy. But if we have another session, of course, we can do like a bit of hands-on. But for the purpose of explaining this, I'm going to do a very brief overview of how it's all about. So this is our function right now. It's a very quick application that I built, and for example, right now, I've restricted it to make sure that you cannot view the guide's information unless you're logged in. And let's just go through the code to see what we're talking about. I hope people can see the code over here. If you cannot see the code, please let me know. Let me try and see if I can increase. Just a minute. Okay, I think this is better now. Yeah, so again, this is how I've arranged my my application. The thing with me is I usually love to say that it's better for you to separately place your code in different files or folders, so you can be able to understand even how your application is flowing. And for this instance, I have so just leave alone the Firebase and Firestore functions, whatever. folder, just look at the Firebase Authentication folder. I have a folder inside that called scripts, and this is where it has my JavaScript files that are going to handle authentication, that's going to handle reading information from the database, etc. And then I also have an image or assets folder where I can just place in my logos, images, blah, blah, blah. And then I have my index HTML file. So I don't want to assume that, okay, I'd like to assume that people in this particular session have at least basics in HTML. So this is how the HTML file looks like. And the most important thing is to make sure that your Firebase SDKs, JavaScript SDKs, is always required and must be listed first. So that means all the script files should be in the header tag, as you can see over here. Then I just added the analytics over here just to track some few things, but that's not important. And then I have my body. And by the way, this is just Bootstrap. I'm using just basic Bootstrap. So no, actually not Bootstrap. Sorry, it's Materialize. And that's why you have like class, gray, light, and 3. So just ignore that. What matters is the flow. So the body inside, I have a navigation bar, which shows the account. It has logout, has create guide, login, sign up, menu items. And then I have admin actions. This is like, for example, if someone has signed in as an admin, they can be able to make someone else as an admin. And then we have a sign up model, which is just a pop-up that tells you to log in, like provide your email address, blah, 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 or providing your passwords and all that. And then also have the login model where you provide your email address and password. And then I have an account model, which is like just to tell you your account details. And then I have a create guide model. This is mainly for admins. Again, this is just, by models, I mean pop-ups. For those maybe a bit confused. And then a guide list is now where I'll be populating information coming in from my Firebase Cloudfast. And then after you're done with that, we have to make sure that, as you can see over here, we have our script files, right? We have our auth, when we have our index.js file. And these are the most important things because one, the auth.js files, it handles everything to do with authentication. The reason why I do this is because I don't want to mix information on I don't want to mix information for authentication with the general logic for the application. So I have separate files for that. I have an authentication file, and I also have the index.js file, which is now for everything else, like reading information from the database and also tapping into the auth.js file. So as you can see now in the index.html, this is something that you should always do. We always have to reference, first of all, the settings file, because settings file is now where we have basically things set. We have our Firebase configuration, and then we also have our initialization of the Firebase application, and then making references to the Firestore. And then after that, now we create a scripts. We're still inside the body, and the reason why we put these script files, especially the ones we've just created on our own, is because you cannot put it on top. You cannot put it in the header tag as the Firebase SDK ones, because okay, this has to do with DOMs. So it's like how do I even say? I want to use a very simple analogy. It's like you have to unlock the door before you get into the house. You cannot go into the house without unlocking the door, because the house will tell you, I need you to give me the key. So when you have these script files on top, it's going to be trying to refer to something that has not been loaded yet. Because if we look at the index.js files, I'm using DOM manipulation to tap into things to do with, for example, say for example, I'm trying to tap into the class called logged in. I'm trying to tap into some of the classes, not classes, sorry, but then some of the list classes that are, for example, in the guide list. So it's like when you're trying to load the scripts before the HTML file, it's always going to give you errors like undefined, say, name class or undefined ID class. So you have to make sure that these scripts come after you have put in the skeleton of your application. And now that's how the screen looks like. So this happens because I have authentication in place. So first of all, let's just go through the authentication file. So as I mentioned here, this is a file used for anything Firebase related. Now, I don't want to go to the cloud function right now because that's not something we want to do. Yes, so if you could remember this particular, let me just share again. If you could remember this part where you set authentication state observer and get user data. Now, this is the function that does that. Remember, we have auth already. We referred auth as being Firebase auth function. So we can just go into the tap into auth functionality. So auth.onState changed user, and then the parameter, of course, is a user. Now, say if a user has been logged in, this is just for admin. So ignore that. What else? Ignore that. Yes. So come over here. Say get data from Firestore using real-time listeners. So if the person has been logged in, I'm saying now I can now be able to control the data that is being accessed. So when I say get data from Firestore, I mean Firestore. Sorry. Let me just share with you the Firestore, the Firebase project, the overview first of all. So because I feel like I've probably I don't want to mix everything up and down, so I just want to show you how this looks like. So this is how a typical project looks like. For the purpose of demo, let me just create a project just to show you how it works. So when you go onto firebase.google.com or console.firebase.google.com, you're able to create a project, right? So you just click on add a project, the name of the project, say Wayne's project. What's going to do is Google Cloud Platform is going to provision a project on the console automatically. So you don't have to handle things to do with servers and all that. Google Cloud Platform does that for you. So you say continue. Maybe I want Google Analytics. Yes. Click on continue. Because I've selected I want analytics, of course I want the default account for Firebase to be using and then it creates your project. Now when it's done creating a project, this is what you're going to have, right? You're going to have analytics dashboard because you've enabled analytics. And if you look on the left hand side, you're going to see a panel of menu items. The first one is of course authentication. When you go onto authentication, initially this place is going to be empty because I want to do this with this project. Okay, so we have Wayne's project ready over here. Yeah, so authentication, initially it's usually empty, like you don't have anything right now, and you click on get started, and then when you click on get started, it's going to ask you what kind of sign-in method do you want. So depending on your application's needs, you would want to say, I want, of course, to enable email and password. Click on enable. Email link passwordless sign in if you want. You can do that. And then it enables it for you. If you want the phone, you enable it. If you want Google, you can enable it. And then project support email. Of course, I can just put in any email address that I want. And then save, and you can put in any name that you want. Save. Now this means that this application, if I have it set already, I can enable the user to sign in either using the email and password or use the Google accounts, whichever way. Google, and then Firebase is going to handle that using the functions that I would have put in place. So just going back to our project. So this is how it is. Right now, I've just enabled the email and password for this particular purpose. And here I can see all the particular users that have logged in or that have signed up into my account. into my project, and I can also see when they were last signed in. And again, this is the beauty of Firebase. It has like this very simple dashboard that gives you the most simple information that is very crucial to your application. Again, it gives you also the user ID, of which now, if you go on Cloudfast, and if you could remember this particular point when we said when you are creating a user or signing up a user, it explicitly does that for you, like adding data, as you can see over here. So we have a users collection, of which is it's a function that is triggered when someone when someone signs in already as a user. It's fired, and then the particular users can be seen over here. So it's loading, and then that's it. This is it. So this particular function just gives of course you have the email and the password, but then I don't want to have the email and the password information being recorded in the users collection. I just want like very simple stuff. Let's say I just want the first name, last name, and their bio, just for an example. Yeah, so this is Cloudfast. Again, initially it's usually empty. Let me just show you with this project that we just created. Initially it's empty, but then you can say now create database and start in production mode, but then I want to start it in test mode because for now I just want it to be typical read and write, and then I can choose any location that I want. Then you enable it. So the reason why it asks you to choose the location that you want is, again, you can be able to triangulate and see if you're in Kenya, which is the nearest location. Is it Europe? Is it the US? Is it China? Is it India? Just as an example. So after it creates your database, you'll now be able to write onto this Cloudfast. So as you can see right now, our collection is empty. It's completely empty. And then for this particular purpose of this project that we have the guides collection, you have users collection. And again, these are functions that are usually triggered when someone puts something onto the database. So let's go back to our code. Again, I hope you understand how this is working. Like, listen for status change, and that means if the person is logged in or not. So I have something called setup guides, and as you can see over here, I say that this method is in the index.js file. So let's search for setup guides and see what it does. Yeah, so setup guides will take in data from the other JS method of getting data from Firestore collection and cycle through and output a guide for each element inside that data array. So again, this is the beauty with JavaScript. You can always call functions from another script file, depending on how you want it. So in this index file, I have created a function that or a method that's called setup guides. This setup guides takes in data coming in from the Cloudfast, and with that, I'm saying that for each and every information that I'm getting, and that means it's coming from the collection, I want you to give me the guide title and the guide content. And with that is, I'm using DOM manipulation to just say populate this inside this particular, let me show you, inside this container, as you can see over here. This is where now the information is going to be populated about those particular guides. And now going back to the auth snapshot.docs, of course, because I just want the information. So I'm passing the information, and then inside my index file, it's going to now take the data and then just destructure it. By destructure, I mean now taking the information bit by bit, whether you want the ID, whether you want the title, whether you want the content, and then populate it as a list because you want to see information coming in as list. And then we also have another function to create a new guide from input. So this is a way of, again, DOM manipulation. What I'm just saying is create form document.query selector create form. As we go back to the index file, we have create form. Let's just search for create form. Right here, ID called create form. Basically, I'm saying I want you to get the whole form, which has been tagged by the ID create form. And then with that is I'm adding an event listener. That means when someone clicks on submit, as you can see over here, and what I'm doing is here I'm preventing it from sending in blank stuff, and I'm saying remember that I've of course created a variable called create form, which has a connection to the DOM of the particular form. So with this, I can be able to access everything that is inside the form. That means I can access the input, I can access the button, you name it, right? And then now we have now this new part, which says now, go into the collection, create a collection called guides, and then add information called title, content. Again, these are the key value pairs that I mentioned. So let me just show you how this looks like on the Firebase console. As you can see over here, we have title content, right? But then this is explicitly mentioned over here. But then when it comes to the values, these values come in from the front end, right? Please, if probably I'm confusing you, please let me know. Now, because I have access to everything inside that particular form called create form, I can now say inside create form, go inside and find a name, go and find the ID title, right? So I've said go create form, then inside using square brackets, title.value. Basically, I'm saying go inside this particular form, find the title, find the ID title, find the ID content, and then pick the values. That means pick the values from that input. And with that, I say, now when you've added, this particular function is for the add. So that means it has taken it into the Firebase. Now Firebase again returns a promise. So you need to resolve. So now I'm saying .then you have to do something after that. After you've added, do something. So I'm saying now close the model which had been popped up, blah blah, and then reset the form, catch the errors, whichever we want. And then yeah, so that's for creating a new guide. That's basically now adding information or adding onto the Cloudfast. And then we have for the sign up user function, which again, it just uses the create user with email and password, gets the email and the password, and then after that, let me just take you through it step by step. First of all, I want to get access to the sign up form, and this is the ID sign up form. So we go on to sign up HTML, find sign up form. There it is. We have a form of ID sign up form, and I'm saying gain access to everything inside that form. So now I can say sign up form dot add event listener. Of course, I want that when someone clicks on the submit, something is done, right? So first of all is get user info from the sign up form. Again, I create a constant email, which now passes the value, gets the value passed in from the form. That is the email address and also the password. And again, these are ID names. Please remember that these are ID names, and this is how you can get information from the front end using DOM manipulation. And then now I can pass in these variables onto my function create user with email and password. After that, remember it returns a promise, so I need to resolve. And then I say then, because instead of using normal add, okay, I don't want to do this so much. This is something I was just typing in. Then, because it now returns information, I can now say, let's say I want to gain information. I want to get the information coming in from signing up a user. So when I say cred, it can be anything. It can be data, it can be cred, whichever. Is I want to gain access to the information that's going to be returned with this promise. So now with this, I can be able to get the user ID. I can be able to get the user email, and even if you want, get the email user password. But for this instance, because I want to say I want to create another, I want to create a document. I want to create a collection called users, and then with some information. I just want the ID. And with that, it's going to help me to say, remember that at first, you don't necessarily have to set the document's name, right? And by document's name, I mean this. So we have the collection and then we have the document. In between is the document's name or the document ID. So when you add the guide, it's going to be automatic. It's going to assign you the ID automatically. But then for users part, I'm using the user IDs as the document's name or as the document ID, so that I can be able to say, I know this particular user and I can retrieve information of this particular user using their ID. So that's what is happening over here. I'm saying when I sign up this user, whatever is returned, I just want to get the user ID so that I can be able to use it as the document name of this particular user's information. And again, creating the user's collection, using their ID as the document name, and then setting up their information that they're going to provide, like at the bio, as the value. And this is what you see over here. Bio, loves to play football and an all-time fan. And then again, we have to resolve whatever's coming out and say now, after you're done with that, you can clear up everything, give me error messages just in case something happens. Again, this is the logout function, which just handles the logout, of course. Again, using DOM manipulation and just getting access to the logout ID. If we search for logout over here, it's a button, but I just want to get the ID so that I can be able to do something with it. Add event listener. When it's clicked, just sign up the user, right? And then with the login user, again, gain access to the login form, gain the details, pass them to the function of sign in with email and password, and then reset everything, and we're done. So that's everything about the auth file. So if we go back to our project and now say we want to log in. So I just wanted to show you something in the index.js file. Yeah, so before we go into logging in right now, remember that setup guides, the one that we mentioned, that it's going to handle access to the data based on authorization. So that means if you're signed out, you won't be able to view the information. So first of all, I'm saying now, if this particular information has been sent to me through Firestore, populate the information onto this page. But then if not, then what's going to happen is I want you to just say login to view guides, as you can see over here. Again, remember, setup guides is triggered by making sure that this particular user has been logged in, as you can see over here. This is where setup guides is triggered. If not, it's usually empty. And if there's nothing inside that particular setup guides, it's going to say login to view guides. So let's log in. When you click on login, again, it's a model that's being triggered. I put in my email address and login, or let's just create a sign. Let's just sign up a user. So let's say Ian, for example. So let's say Ian, email.com. Oh, and by the way, Firebase allows you to verify someone's email address, so you can. I'd recommend it because, for example, you'll be building large-scale applications which need you to verify email addresses. And then password, let's just say I want them to suggest me a password. Yes, suggest me a password, and then one line bio, say Ian is part of the DSC Moi core team. Right, and then we sign up Ian. So as you can see now, Ian has been logged in, and now Ian is able to see all the information that is currently in the database. If Ian was logged out, you will never see Ian viewing information. So if you want to see Ian's information now, we can see the account details. Logged in as Ian at gmail.com. Ian is part of the DSC Moi team. So this is like aesthetics, right? And then when you log out, again, Ian is unable to see information. So you need to be able to log in to be able to see the information, and that's where the setup guides and the authentication comes into play. And now let me just log out and then log in as let me just log in as an admin. Show you how to create a guide. So now these are the guides. Of course, this is coming in from the database. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to be no. Right now we have how many? We have 6 guides, right? So I want you to see this happening. I want you to see something. So if I say I add a document, auto ID. So hold on, content title. I want to show you. I want to add the 7th one so you can see how it works. So we have content, DSC MOI. And by the way, again, you can add a document or collection manually through the Firestore console, or you can just do it using functions and then just letting your user do everything on the front end, and you'll be handling it using functions. But then I'm just doing this for demo purposes. And then title is say greetings. No, not greetings. DSC MOI events. Firebase events. And I click on save. This thing is so fast that as you can see, DSC MOI Firebase event is here. It's real time. That means I don't need to refresh my page to always see DSC MOI Firebase event. If I say I want to delete DSC MOI event, I just go onto that particular document and say delete documents. Go back to my app. It's no longer there. It's so fast that the person cannot even doesn't really like. The person will be like, oh wow, this is magic. But actually you have functions that are handling asynchronous data. That means whether it's creation or deletion or editing, it's always going to update in real time, and that means the person doesn't really have to create they don't have to refresh the particular page to see the information. So I'm going to create a guide on the front end. Again, say DSC MOI event, DSC MOI Firebase Essentials event. Now say please fill in the field. Here the attendees, and then create. So fast that it's just in here over here. As you can see over here. Again, if I want, I would have put, of course, the delete function over here, but I didn't want that because I wanted people to just understand the basics of how people add data inside the Firestore and how the authentication works. And again, because I'm an admin, I have admin privileges. I can be able to create the guides. But then, if this person is not an admin, the person is not able to. The person is not able to create the guide. So that is something I'll have to come probably another day to explain about how to have admins using cloud functions, and that is something probably we'll do at a later stage. But apart from that, let me just see what else I can touch on before we close up the session. Yeah, yes. So as you can see right now we have let me see. You can see over here right now on the navigation bar, we have account, logout, create guide, right? But then when I log out, I only have what? Login and sign up. And this is all DOM manipulation, while at the same time, it's also being controlled by authorization. So if I go back, if I go into my index.html and then look at these links, by default, all these links are there. And what I've done is I've put them I've displayed them as none by default. And it's whether it's going to be displayed or not, it's going to be handled by authentication. So I have account, I have logout, create guide, login, sign up. And then when I come onto my authentication, right? Um, in the setup guides function, first of all, I have access to DOM. First of all, I have access to DOM elements for showing or hiding based on authentication. So I have logged out links and logged in links. By that I mean, when I say document.query selector all, I'm saying all the elements which have the class logged out. I want to assign them to a variable called logged out links. So let's go to our HTML file and look for .logged out. Oops, sorry. Logged out. Yes, as you can see over here, logged out. As you can see over here, I have two of them, logged out, and these are only going to be shown when the person has been logged out. That is the login and the sign up links. And how I'm handling that with the setup is that when this particular person is logged out, right, I have to make sure that the logged in links are not displayed and the logged out links are displayed. And by logged out links, again, these are the links that I want to display when the person has been logged out. And that is the sign up and the login links. And for the logged in links are all, let me just type in logged in. All the links, I want them to be displayed when this particular person has been signed in. So that is the account and the logout links. And all that is being taken care of in this setup UI function. And again, this is just a matter of playing around with DOM manipulation and all that. Again, I don't want to go into the nitty-gritties of it. I just want to show you an overview of how it works. And that is how you can be able to control access to your information coming in from your database and all that, and making sure that you have the correct menu items, the correct links being displayed based on a particular user's authorization or particular user's role, maybe as an admin or user. So you can also notice that the create guide can only be seen when this person is an admin, because I've set it up in such that I have it as an admin items, of which can only be triggered if this particular person is an admin. And I think I've come to the end of my session. Yes. Please, I know I might have spoken too fast, or maybe I've brushed over so many things. So if you have any question, please let me know. I can be able to answer it in whichever way. Yes. Any question?
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Cliff can guide us through the Q&A. Cliff?
Yeah, Ian, I'm around. So I think when we had a question in the chat section, and someone was asking if Firebase supports async await functions.
Oh, yes, definitely. And by that, it's usually handled by the functions such as on snapshot or snapshot changes. That's where it actually handles your async await methods. So you don't really have to explicitly say async await when it comes to reading your data. Firebase handles that automatically. But then if you're having APIs, for example, for another database, you can definitely implement it. But it's already inbuilt with some of these out-of-the-box functions coming in with Firebase Firestore.
Okay, I think that question is handled. And I think asking on behalf of some of the people who maybe have not used Firebase before, I might want to ask you, Wayne, like, how do people initialize like their projects with Firebase?
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry, probably I brushed over that. So as I mentioned, first and foremost, when you go into Firebase console, you add your project and all that, and then it's going to create your project, right? Now, for example, remember, if you could remember this particular point, where the Firebase settings, this information is coming, it's not something that I've just coded just like that. It's something that is coming in from Firebase, and this is how I found the information. So when you click on getting started by adding Firebase to your app, you can choose whether you want to do iOS, Android, and for this case is web. And then for you to be able to get your Firebase SDK information, you have to register your app. So you can give it a nickname, say Wayne Eateries or Wayne Restaurant. And then if you want, you can set up Firebase hosting, but we don't want hosting for now. So you say register app. And then when that is done, you're going to be given your SDK information. So this is what you create inside your script file. But for others, they always like to have it inside the HTML file. But because of security purposes, of course, you'd want to have your script file maybe hosted somewhere else, because you don't want such information like your API key falling into the wrong hands. Because remember, as I mentioned, that your information is going to be built after a certain point in time. So if you allow everyone to be having access to such things like API keys, it's going to be a problem. So this is where now I created a script called Firebase Settings, which has my configuration for Firebase, that is the Firebase config, as you can see over here. And then after you're done, you now initialize your Firebase application. So you do Firebase.initialize app based on the Firebase config information that I provided here, and then also I'm initializing analytics. And then with that, I can now make reference to Auth, DB, and functions. Now, what happens next is now in your auth.js, right? Maybe someone would say, okay, so how are you having access to information coming in from Firebase settings? Remember, in our index.html file, we put things in order when it comes to our. So first of all, I put in the I reference the settings file. Remember, it's kind of like a top-down approach. That means it has to start from the top going all the way to the bottom. So the Firebase settings start first because that's where everything is initialized. And then after the Firebase settings, I now go on to the auth, because auth taps into the information that is present in the Firebase settings. Remember, you have what? You have things to do with the auth, and also you have the DB, right? And then after the auth, you have the index file. So the index now file can tap into the auth file and also the Firebase settings file. And then that's how you configure your application using Firebase. So from there, you can now say continue to console, and then now you're able to see any information when it comes to Wayne Eateries. So you can always see information in your Cloudfast based on whatever you would have, however you'd have configured it. And now you can always read your information using some of the functionalities that I mentioned, which is like dot on snapshot. Let me just show you the slide just to be very, very clear. As you can see over here, you have the DB. Remember, DB is the reference to Firebase.Firestore. And then I'm saying going to the collection cities. For this case, it can be users. And then the .doc, you can put in the ID of the user that you want, and the .on snapshot, and then say whatever else you want to do with it. So and in this case, we were just console.logging it to see what kind of data is in there. Yeah, I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, I think you've explained it.
Okay.
So I think we have another question. Someone's asking, like, is Firebase safer than JSON Web Tokens?
Oh, yes. So Firebase allows you to, if you want, also you can add JWTs on top of it. But out of the box, Firebase is secure. But if you want, you can also add your JWTs.
Okay, so I think if anyone still has a question, you can post it in the chat section so that we can relay it to the speaker. Okay, I think I can also ask a similar question.
Mhm.
Like, how does Firebase hosting relate to like all the other hosting platforms? Like we have GitHub, we have like Netlify and all the others. Like, what's the difference? What different thing does Firebase offer compared to the other hosting platforms?
Okay, I think the most notable one, of course, is the Google infrastructure, because when you host your website on Google Cloud servers, there's a higher chance that if there's traffic, your application will still run. And by that is they handle the heavy lifting for you in the background. Um, I think another thing I noticed, especially with Netlify, is that Netlify serves only your index.html file, but for other platforms like Firebase, it can handle anything. So by that I mean, if say you have an application, say my portfolio, say wayne.netlify.app, and then I say I want to go to a page, say bio, right? If I write wayne.netlify.app/bio, I'm gonna have an error. And the reason with that is that Netlify only serves my index.html file. So I have to start from index.html file, and then you can now navigate through buttons or through links that have been triggered by your navigations. But the most notable one, of course, is that Firebase infrastructure is Google Cloud. It's from Google Cloud Platform, and definitely has that scalability on top of it, which helps you to still just handle it helps you to focus on you building your logic for your application, rather than always looking at the server or what's happening in the server, has it crashed, and all that. And again, it also things how to do things like analytics, so you can be able to even take note of where it has actually crashed and what problems are people currently experiencing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Wayne. So I
Yeah.
think we have another question. Someone's asking, what is the best way to go start learning it, and can someone get mentors when using JS or full stack development?
Yeah, so the best way to start, of course, if you have your basic knowledge in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can definitely jump into learning about Firebase. I'm someone who loves to look at like video or YouTube tutorials to really understand, because I don't know, with documentation for me it's a bit tricky. But I know people are different. Some people can be really good with documentation, but I love to use tutorials, because tutorials can give me different ways of how to implement something. So if you can see over here in this particular in this particular app, I have like notes whereby I note down and say, for example, I used this because of this, but I can also use this. So for example, over here, instead of using the normal add, we use doc, since we want to dictate the ID that will be stored or generated. Firebase will check for the user collection, blah, blah. And all these were notes that I was taking note of when I was looking at that particular that tutorial. So again, YouTube tutorials are there. I'd personally recommend Net Ninja. He has really good tutorials when it comes to Firebase. Also, I'd recommend Traverse Media for anything to do with web. Of course, HTML, CSS, JS, React, Angular, Vue, Django, whichever. And of course, mentors are there. Of course, you can look up onto your networks and see the the mentors that could be there. Say if the people are interested in JavaScript or full stack development, there's so many. So just tap into your network, and I'm very sure that I think DSC Moi in general also has mentors who handle like web development and all that. And even if you don't get them from your community, if you see someone who is good at something they're interested in, just hit them up. If they say no, of course, there's someone else who will definitely help you out.
Okay, thanks for that, Wayne. So I think, is anyone still having a question? You can also unmute and maybe ask your question. So I think like we have no other questions. So maybe I'll hand over the session to Ian. Ian, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sana Cliff, and thank you, Sana, to Wayne for making time to have this session. From us, tunasema asante sana, and Wayne is such an inspiration, and personally, me joining communities is I got to know about communities through Wayne, hata kama hawezi jua.
Wow.
But Wayne is that you can follow Wayne on Twitter. I think it's at what, Wayne?
Yeah, at Wayne_Gakuo. Yeah.
Okay, thank you to everyone who created time to join this session. And for those who did not make it, this session was recorded and will be live on YouTube. Just make sure search DSC more on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and the session will be hit the notification bell so that immediately we upload the channel, the video, you get it. And again, let me apologize on behalf of Wadid Ivaloba. She could not make to the session, but definitely atadandia the YouTube thing. So asanteni to everyone. Kama kuna mtu ako na swali, Cliff.
Yeah, so I think I have one last question maybe for Wayne.
Yeah.
Like in the Firebase features that you've told us about, like, is there any one of those features that require, like, are they paid features and free features, or all of them are free?
Oh yeah. So currently, so for example, if you enable billing on your Google Cloud Console, because for you to be able to use Firebase stuff, you need to enable billing for some of them. But Google, for example, gives you $300 worth of credit, which you can use for a year. And of course, you have to put in details like your account number, your account name, and all that. But they will not deduct unless your voucher has expired. So it's free. For some of them, it's free. Like hosting is free, but for some features like cloud functions, mostly cloud functions. And if you want to integrate things like Mailchimp, by the way, Firebase has an integration for Mailchimp, so you don't have to do a lot of stuff on Mailchimp. You need to enable billing, but then that's, of course, will be deducted after your $300 is up. But then if you are still on the $300 credits, the money is just going to be deducted from that credit, so you don't have to always look at that. But after a year, you have to make sure you check on your billing, unless you're going to get a high amount of billing, like 12,000, because again, remember, Google Cloud is all about virtual machines and instances. So wherever you host your application, it can be hosted in China. And if, for example, there's a lot of traffic in China, maybe something can happen, and let's say you can get like a large amount of money that you need to pay. But most of the Firebase stuff is completely free. Authentication is free. Firestore is free. Real-time database is free. It's only for cloud functions that you need to enable billing.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. But I also see another question that's been posted. Someone is asking, does Firebase restrict the number of users that it can handle?
No restriction.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian.
Yeah.
Okay, Ian, you can continue.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Before I close up, anyone more with a question, you can just a +1 on the chat section, or if you have a comment or to our speaker. Anybody not from Kenya wants to say hi? Okay, I guess no.
Hi.
Okay, Dominic, hi.
I'm Dominic. I'm from Zambia. So basically, I'm running a hack club Zambia, which is That's one of the things that I do. So what is interesting is like I'm new to this Firebase thing, and I've been using APIs for some time. Even right now, I'm using APIs for Google Books because I've created an online library where we are just trying to make that. So maybe the question that I would want to ask, because I've been most of the time I've been using my SQL. So the other question that I would want to ask, does Firebase support that?
Okay. So your question is, does Firebase support like APIs or something?
My SQL database,
Uh-huh.
does Firebase support that?
Well, okay. So the thing is, MySQL is SQL database, and Firebase is no SQL database.
Oh,
Of course, when it comes to structure, they're completely different, but some of the concepts are the same. So, for example, in Firebase, you have things called collections and documents.
yeah.
Collections are something you could probably compare it to tables when it comes to MySQL. And then documents will what you compare to an entry when it comes to MySQL. So if you saw what I mentioned when it comes to key value pairs, so the
Yeah.
keys like name, ID, age, and all that are what you'd compare it to the column names when it comes
Oh,
to a table inside MySQL, right?
I see.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like these are two different paradigms. It depends whichever one you want to go with. For if you want something very simple and fast, I'll definitely go for Firebase because again, when it comes to querying information from the database in Firebase, it's much simpler than when it comes to MySQL.
Yeah, why I'm asking you that, because I know technology is changing and is evolving. So what I've been working around with is my SQL for some time. So I'm trying to shift from that,
Hmm.
because also, like you are saying, when it comes to querying of data,
Hmm.
it's difficult for me to query data from my SQL. I must use other method and tools just to gather the data that I would want from the database.
Yeah, because I personally also used my SQL. I think like throughout my university life, I've been using my SQL. I started like doing Firebase, I think like a year ago, and I personally feel like I don't think I can go back to my SQL unless required. But because I find Firebase much simpler, and the functions are like plain English, so you can actually understand what is happening. And again, it has an amazing support system. It has an amazing documentation of which you can always refer to whenever you have issues with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome. And I hope you're staying safe in Zambia.
Yeah, basically, I've been indoors from March because I'm running we would say an NGO for art.
Uh,
Uh, so I'm doing an art book library online, of which I'm using my SQL, but using Google APIs for Google, because I'm using the IBS numbers just to find the books and retrieve information from that.
all right, awesome. Wishing you the best, and thank you for joining.
Okay,
Really
thank
appreciate it.
you for hosting me also.
All right.
Awesome, Dominic. First, our greetings from Kenya. We say asante sana in Swahili. Thank you.
Okay, Nduku.
Before we wind up, anybody left him behind? Okay, thank you, Wayne, for joining, and thank you everyone who showed up. Asanteni sana. The session will be on YouTube as soon as possible.
Yeah, and thank you once again. I'm just sharing with you guys tutorials. If anyone is interested in checking them out. I would like to say a big thank you to DSC Moi, and it's always a humbling opportunity to do these sessions with you guys, and also hearing that in one way or the other I influence someone to get involved into tech. It's truly a humbling thing because I know myself I have grown through communities, and for me, I always love giving back to the communities, and DSC has been very instrumental in this. And yeah, thank you for having me. And it's amazing seeing you guys all here. And thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I know it might be a bit technical, but I hope at least I gave some insights on what you can do with Firebase. And if you still need more clarification, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter, or you can even check the tutorials if you need to. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Reach out to Wayne at Wayne_Gakuo, at DSC_Moi, at Ian Joroge.